Glad that you're here in person. Got a few of you and got a few more online. Welcome to you that are watching online today. Like she said, my name is Chaplain Chris, and I am the chaplain at the Utah State Prison at the point of the mountain there in Draper. And so I'm just going to talk to you a little bit today about how a prison chaplain offers hope to those who have been addicted to pornography to the point that it has led them to become incarcerated at the Utah State Prison. So how I'm going to go about this today is I actually asked some of my inmates there at the prison. I asked them 2 questions and had them write it down on a piece of paper. And the questions I asked them were this: how did pornography lead you to commit your crime? And what negative effects has pornography had upon your life? And so we'll go over a few of their responses, and I'll share with you some stories as well as some ways that we offer hope to these individuals who have struggled with this addiction for a long, long time. But before I jump into that, some of you might be asking, what's a chaplain? I've never heard of that word before. A chaplain is somebody that is a spiritual counselor, a religious advisor. So maybe like a pastor at one church, or a priest at another, or a bishop at another, or an omen or a shaman or anything like that. So at the Utah State Prison, I function as an interfaith, non-denominational chaplain, which means if you're a Buddhist, I'm going to help you be the best Buddhist you can be. If you're Muslim, I'm going to help you be the best Muslim you can be. If you're Christian, whether that's Catholic, Protestant, Lutheran, Presbyterian, or a member of the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, I'm going to help you be the best person in that religion that you can be. And so that's what I do. I help with these guys in a religious sense, and I have helped people from all those religions that I just named and many, many more. We have hundreds of different religions of people that go to those different religions at the prison, and I help every single one of them. So with that little introduction, we'll jump into a few of these things. So again, the questions that I asked these guys were, how has pornography negatively affected your life, and how did pornography lead you to commit your crime? And this is our first individual. And I asked them these questions, and they responded in an anonymous fashion. And so I don't know who wrote this, I don't know what they were in prison for, but they will tell us sometimes during the reading of these. So here we go, number 1. I started looking at pornography as a teenager. It was a habit that slowly grew to more intense images until finally one day I came across illegal content, and I started to incorporate that into the things I would search for and look at, which was underage material. I came to the point that my life seemed to revolve around pornography. I would be at work, and I would often be focused on what I would do after the workday was over, what type of porn I would search for that evening. I would often stay up late at night so I could spend hours searching for and consuming pornography. I would lie to my wife when she would find images on the computer. I would not take care of my children. I would rather have porn. I ended up in prison because of porn. I am now divorced, and I have not had much contact with my children in 8 years. I have spent thousands of dollars on the habit of porn, and I was not productive at work. I became irritable, I became sleep deprived, and I isolated myself. Heartbreaking to hear, isn't it? That this individual, what he has gone through. But these individuals, as I work with them, they're starting to get some hope in their lives, because they've never really had to deal with this until they got caught and got put into prison. But now they're starting to get some hope. They're starting to change, right? They're starting to find some reasons and some methods and some tools on how to get better. This guy talked to us a little bit about when he started looking at pornography and why he was drawn to it. But it makes me think of some of the stuff that this guy lost, right? He lost his family. He lost his kids. He wasn't productive at work. He pretty much lost everything. And it's so sad. But he wants to change. and he wants to get better. And my job as a chaplain is I get to talk with these guys individually, one-on-one, and they get to come and sit down with me and say, Chaplain, I need some help. I'm in prison, I got caught, and I want to change. I just don't know how to change. Chaplain, I've tried everything in the book, and I just don't know how to change. I've been working on this for years. Can you please help me change? We say, yeah, we can talk. Let's do this. Me and you, one-on-one. And I sit down and I counsel with them. And the biggest thing I try to help them see is that they're not the monster that they think they are. That they're not as horrible as society sometimes makes them out to be. That usually what happened to them was something that started when they were kids. For instance, there was a 7-year-old boy, and he went to school to play with his friends. And they were playing, and he was playing with one of his friends that was a boy and one of his friends that was a girl. And they're playing outside in a tire. And one of the boys says to him, he says, hey, you want to play a game? A game that I saw in one of my dad's movies. And then he told the little 7-year-old boy and the little 7-year-old girl what to do, what he saw on one of his dad's movies. And so for the first time, that little 7-year-old boy had sex. And he said he was addicted. He said he would go back to that tire every single day because he wanted to have that experience again. But that little girl never came back. And he said he would think about her and think about what happened. And he always wanted that again. So when he got a little older, when pornography presented itself to him, he jumped right into it. And later on in his life, he committed a sexual crime. Did what he did, was it wrong? Of course. Should this guy be in prison? Yeah. Does he need to get help? Obviously. But it wasn't as much as his fault as he thinks it was. He thinks he's a monster that did something horrible, and he did. But when did it start? When he was a 7-year-old. And how did that start? Because another little kid watched his dad's pornography. So this guy's in prison trying to get help for an addiction that he's fought ever since he was 7 years old, and he just didn't know it. It's so hard for a lot of these guys. I've had many guys come into me and say, Chaplain, you always talk in your class when you teach us about the stuff that happens to us as kids, how it programs us when we're adults. And the things we do as adults are just the way we're acting out from what happened to us as kids. He's like, for a long time, I didn't believe you, Chaplain. I heard you and I said to myself, Chaplain, I don't believe that at all. There was nothing that happened to me as a kid that made me do what I did when I was older. Nothing. But then he said, after really thinking about it, there was something I haven't thought about in 30 years. When we were kids, we'd find my mom's movies, stuff that she would watch with her boyfriends. And then we'd do the same things. And then my uncles would take us in their cars and make us smell gasoline. And so we'd get really high and not know what's going on, and then make us do stuff to them in a sexual way. So Chaplain, yeah, something bad did happen to me when I was a kid. And I can see how it affected me when I got older. He's like, Chaplain, I'm not a monster, am I? No, you're just a little kid that got abused, a little kid that was a victim of somebody else. So when you got older, you had a victim, and the cycle just kept going. Another guy came to me and said, Chaplain, you've been talking a lot about what happened to us as kids affects the way we are when we're adults. And I thought of something I hadn't thought about in 20 years. When I was 6 years old, my older brother sexually abused me for a long time. And so when I got older, I kind of did the same thing. And that's why I'm in jail. Like, Chaplain, I'm not a monster, am I? No, you're not a monster. You're just a little kid that had something horrible happen to him. And you got programmed when you were 6 or 7 years old to act the way you did when you were 26 or 36 or 37. Or however old you were. So there's hope for you. Even if you think you're a monster, I promise you you're not. You're not as bad as you think you are. go see somebody. Talk with somebody. They'll help you go through. They'll help you find out those things that happened to you when you were really young that made it super easy for you to fall into this trap of pornography when you got a little bit older. But let's go on to another one that this guy wrote. So this guy said, pornography led me to sell drugs so I could have sex whenever I wanted to. It caused me not to understand a trusted relationship with a woman. It caused me not to have a wife or any relationship for any long period of time because I believed if the sex was no good, then I wouldn't want to be around them. But if the sex was good, then I would want to own them. So there we go. A guy that's in jail for selling drugs. And why did he start selling drugs? Because of pornography. Wow. What a sad thing when we can see how pornography influences people on many different fronts and leads them to do many different things. Crimes not only in the sexual realm. But he doesn't say what led him to pornography or how he found it. It makes me think of another story. I met with another guy, right? When he was 12 years old, what did he find in his dad's bag? A movie. And he watched it. And that started his sexual addiction. And then when he got older, he committed a sexual crime. Dads, if you're listening, please get rid of it. Your kids are most certainly going to find it. On to another one. This guy says, pornography is one of the main reasons I am in prison. I struggle with anxiety and depression. I have been in a place so dark that I have tried to take my own life instead of seeking out healthy ways to deal with my struggles. I chose to self-medicate with pornography. It helped me feel something, forget about my own pain for a while, but just as any drug, the high didn't last. I needed more and more. Then the simple pictures weren't enough. I slowly looked for other things that would give me the same feeling as the first time I viewed pornography. I eventually found myself in criminal sexual activity because pornography wasn't enough. Everything started with pornography, or I should say, seeking out comfort in pornography instead of something more healthy. There we have it. Negative feeling. How do I get rid of this negative feeling? How do I get rid of this bad feeling? I turn to pornography because it helps me feel better. I've talked to countless individuals, and that's what they do. Just as you learn in your therapy classes, right? When you get stressed, when you get angry, when you get bored, you have a feeling you don't want to have, and you want to get rid of it, and you don't know how, there's a quick fix. Every time. And they turn to it instead of turning to another way. So, realize that when you have a negative feeling, you got to get rid of it, and you got to do it in a different way than you've done it in the past. Let's go on to the next one. Pornography is like other addictions. It will take your emotions and thinking from the reality you are living in into another world. You see what you need and want, not thinking of the consequences of your actions. I lost my freedom spiritually and physically. I was a slave to this addiction. But over time in prison and through therapy and classes, I see how bad this addiction is. The men and women at the Utah State Prison, they get to go through therapy. And the reason they get to do that is because of you. Thank you for paying your taxes. You probably haven't had many people say that to you before, but thank you from somebody that sees firsthand how some of those tax dollars are used. They're used for these men and these women who have had horrible things happen to them as children. And so they repeated the horrible mistakes of their parents or uncles or whoever it was. And they need help. and they don't know how to get it. But because of your tax dollars, they do. They get professionally trained therapists to sit down with them one-on-one and talk with them and give them ideas and tools on how to overcome these things. They get to sit down in classes and hear people present things. They get a chaplain that sits down with them one-on-one and gets to talk with them about things they can't share with anybody else. Some of these guys are talking about all the stuff they have in their past with their therapists, but they can't tell their therapist what's going on right here, right now, today. Because if they tell the therapist they're still struggling with stuff, the therapist might say, well, you need to stay in prison longer. And they don't want to stay in prison any longer. But they can come to me, their chaplain. I have this thing called clergy confidentiality, which means I can't tell anybody anything that me and that person have talked about. And they'll come to me and they'll say, Chaplain, can you help me? Every single day since I was 12, I've done something sexual with myself. Every single day since I was 12. Chaplain, I'm 26 now. For 14 years, every single day. I want to stop. How do I stop, Chaplain? I've tried everything, but I can't even go one single day without it. I say, tell me some more. Tell me what happened to you when you were really young. Chaplain, nothing happened to me when I was really, actually, Chaplain, something did happen to me when I was really young. Yeah, and we help them see what happened to them when they were 5 or 6 or 7, how it kind of got them programmed in that way, got the addiction started. And we help them see that there's different ways, because they've usually never been able to talk about this with anybody. Because if they do, that person might be able to penalize them or punish them, but me, I can't punish them. I can't penalize them, so we can just talk as friends. So if you're struggling with something, maybe you're like this guy, you've had this problem for years, go talk to somebody. Go share with them what's really going on. Open up to them, and they'll help you. They'll help you see that you're not the monster you think you are. You're not as messed up as you think you are. You're a good person that's maybe got a bad habit, and they're going to work with you, and they're going to meet with you and talk with you so you can get through it. On to another one. I hurt my love. Pornography hurt her when I watched it and made her feel hurt and not loved. It caused me to lust after other women. It kind of became an addiction. I realize it is very wrong, and I regret it. When it comes to pornography, it is all negative. I still struggle with it, and I know it's wrong. Using meth and porn broke up my relationships. So, there we have a guy. Sounds like he was in prison for doing some sort of drug, meth in his case. But can you see how the addictions kind of coincide together? The pornography and the meth, always those things that help them feel a little bit better. They just don't know how to deal with negative emotions. So how do you deal with a negative emotion? Do you turn to the meth? Do you turn to the porn? Well, go talk to somebody. They can give you some wonderful, wonderful things. We heard about a few of them just barely from Smith Alley. To exercise, to meditate, to go serve somebody, and to go help. If you're a Bible reader, you've got the classic words of Paul that he wrote in Galatians chapter 5. And he says, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, goodness, gentleness, faith, and self-control. What? Religion causes positive feelings? According to the Apostle Paul, it did. If you're a Bible believer, a Christian, someone who believes in that Spirit, you can pray and say, God, Paul said, I can feel love and joy and peace and goodness and gentleness and self-control. God, I haven't felt that in so long. Please, can I feel it? Can I feel it, please? Paul said I could. There you go. There's one way to have some positive feelings, to counteract all those negative feelings. Let's go on to another. I watch and look at porn when I have a significant other, and sometimes watch it with them and want to do the stuff I see on the movie. But it's never enough. Never enough. Never satisfied. Anybody that's been into it knows there's not enough porn in the world to satisfy you. You always got to have more. He talked about watching it with another person. Reminds me of a guy I talked to that said his dad set him down when he was in his teens and says, hey, I want to show you something that's going to make you happy. And there he was, right there with his father, and they watched a pornography movie. Going to the last one for today. I think it is more than fair to say that pornography is the official reason I am here in prison. I first started watching pornography as a teenager and became addicted very quickly. It eventually bled into my relationships. When I'd be intimate with another person, I would have to think of pornography to stay excited. Porn totally had its grip on me. I was always seeking what I couldn't have. I tried harder and harder and was cheating on my wife very secretively. This led to destroying my marriage. She went off with someone else, so I decided I was now free to pursue what I always wanted. I was going to go after what pornography always told me would satisfy, but it absolutely destroyed, and he wrote destroyed in all capital letters. It absolutely destroyed my life and all in it. Here I am in prison, and it all goes back to a website that taught me and started all of this. Wow. So you can see that these men in prison obviously feel guilty, obviously feel horrible about what they've done, but if guilt trips worked, nobody would ever reoffend. Nobody would ever come back to prison. But sometimes they do. They get out in the world and they start feeling those negative emotions again, and they fall back into that same thing because they don't have any way to deal with the negative emotions. So one of the things you can do when you have negative emotions is to realize it and state what you have. Yeah, I'm having a negative feeling right now. I'm stressed and I need to take care of it. It's okay to have a negative emotion, but what you do with it determines where you're going to go. So with that said, I would now like to speak to anybody who is helping somebody through this. I had a guy that he was in his 60s, and he came to me and said, Chaplain, can you try to get me a visitor to come see me here in prison? I said, well, why is that? He's like, well, no one's ever come to visit me, and I've been in prison 30 years. Well, what about your family? They disowned me because my crime was against somebody in the family. He said, Chaplain, around the holidays, I get pretty suicidal because nobody comes in at Christmas to see me. And I said, well, I'll try to find you a visitor, but until then, how about I be your visitor? It's like, okay. So we set up a time. And next week we sat down together and we chatted. I said, what would you like to talk about? What do you want this visit to be? And he says, Chaplain, what's a cell phone like? He'd been in prison so long. He'd only seen a cell phone on TV. He'd never touched one with his own hands. I'm like, they're pretty cool. You can watch movies on them. You can read news on them. They're like little computers. He's like, really? I'm like, yeah, man, they're pretty awesome. This guy told me why he was in prison. Because he committed a sexual offense. And then he said, Chaplain, hopefully I get out of prison soon. And when I get out, I'm going to get me a girlfriend. I said, well, good for you. But I don't want to get a 65-year-old. I was like, but aren't you 65? He's like, yeah, but I don't want a 65-year-old. I was like, why? Because that's how old my grandma was when she sexually abused me. The men that you see in prison aren't the monsters that some people think they are. They're little kids that got abused. Did that grandma go to prison? No. Did her victim go to prison? Her grandchild? Yeah, he did. They're not monsters. They're people that need help. So thank you again for paying your taxes so they can get the help that they need. Do some of them need to stay there for 30 years? Yeah, so they can get their brains reprogrammed so their testosterone can go way down, so that maybe someday they can come back out. And some of them, probably not, but they can still be there, suffering for what somebody they trusted did to them when they were little kids. If you're a prayer, please pray to whoever you pray to, and pray for those men and those women out there. They need it. And please, if you know somebody out there, don't disown them. They need your love. They need your support. Anybody that is going through this type of addiction needs somebody. Be that person that they can come to, and that they can talk and they can open up to and share with something they've never shared with anybody before in their whole life. And if they reoffend, don't chew them out, because I have enough people doing that. They're doing that to themselves. Say, yeah, you made a mistake, but I'm still here. I'm going to be with you through every single step of it. When my inmates used to leave the prison, I would jokingly say to them, I hope I never see you again. Joking that I never hoped they would come back to prison, but I stopped saying it because some of them started coming back. And I didn't want them to think, oh no, the chaplain is going to be so disappointed in me. He said he never wanted to see me in prison again. I stopped saying it because sometimes they do come back and they need somebody to welcome them back with open arms and say, I love you. It's going to be okay. We're going to get through this together. Yeah, you did something wrong, but let's work on it. Let's give you some more tools. Let's rewire this brain that your abuser wired when you were 5 or 6 or 7. Just the other day, I said to this guy in his 50s, hey, how you doing? Doing all right. How's your family doing? I don't know. They don't talk to me anymore. Some of you might be thinking, Chaplain, is there a way that I can serve? Is there a way I can help these guys at the prison? Yes, but we're in the process of moving the prison from Draper up here past the airport. We're not going to do that till July or August. And so hopefully in August, if you want to, go to the volunteer and religious services page for the Utah State Prison, and you can call us up or email us and we'll find a way. We can get you out there and you can help these people. And you can help them and give them some opportunities and some love. So with that said, we will end there and I'll turn it over to Q&A. We have about 10 minutes, so if you have a question, just say it out and then I'll repeat it so the people online can hear, and then I'll answer your questions that you have for these last 10 minutes. So question, go ahead.
Do you work with juveniles as well, or just adults?
So right now I'm just at the prison, so I work with just the adults. So 18 on to 99. So yeah, just with them. However, a lot of them have been through the juvenile program, right? They've had this struggle all their life and have acted out, right, in their early teens because of something that happened to them when they were younger. So good question. Any other questions? Go ahead. Do I see very many people overcome this issue? Yes. Yes, I do. I see men that have come to prison a couple of times and then they've beat it and they've been out for years, whereas before they could only stay out for months. Now they've been out for years. I see people that come in and if you've ever been to an anonymous program, they have this classic line, we don't reach out for help until we hit rock bottom. And once they hit rock bottom there in prison, they reach out for help and they get it. And for the first time in their life, they're working on it and they're changing. And some of these guys have changed so much that when you hear them speak about it and you hear how they've overcome it, it's inspiring. Just like we heard a few minutes ago from Smith Alley, right? He'd been in it, been right in the middle of it, but he got some help and he overcame it. And now he's an advocate for it. So if you ever go to one of those anonymous programs, you might meet one of these guys from the prison. You might hear their story and you can hear about what happened to them as kids and how it made them act the way they did when they were adults. But now they've got some help and now they're doing good. And now they've turned it. And now they're helping people left and right, night and day, helping people that find themselves in the same situation that they once were in. So yes, we see people overcome it. What other questions? What other questions come to mind? Go ahead.
Are there services for them after they get out of prison to still
Yes, definitely. Yes, lots of. The question was, are there services for them once they get out of prison? So most of the people when they get out of prison, they're on parole, right? So they have to meet with the parole officer quite often. And then obviously all the different religions have a whole bunch of different things that they can go to. They're still trying to meet with different therapists that are out there. It all depends on what the release terms are. But yeah, there's lots of different things, a lot of helping people just like you that have programs out there, that have housing for them. It's very, very hard for people that have committed sexual crimes to find housing. They have to be so far away from schools and so far away from this and that. And they have to sign up on the sex registry wherever they go, right? And so it's very, very difficult for them. But there are people that have places just dedicated to helping them because it's so, so difficult. And my heart just breaks for these men and these women, especially those who have committed sexual offenses. You would think all prisoners, right, once they go to prison, that everybody would have empathy one for another. You committed a crime, I committed a crime. However, the sex offenders on the bottom of the totem pole. Somebody that might be in there for a gang-related thing finds out that their roomie is a sex offender. And sometimes, in sad instances, they take them out. They do something very, very violent to them because they deem that their crime was much worse than the crime that they committed. And so a lot of times we have to separate them. We have to put the sex offenders all by themselves in one part of the prison and people that committed other crimes in another part, just so that they can be kept safe from other people. And I just feel for these men. It's just so hard for them because they're trying to change. They're trying so hard to change, and people, it's just very, very, very difficult. So what other questions can I answer for you? What other things come to mind? Well, as you're thinking of a question, I'll just share just a few more stories. We had a 6-year-old who got abused by his brother for many years. And later on in his life, he committed a crime. And the person that turned him in was the same brother that abused him. And now that brother that abused him was the one that programmed him to do what he did. Won't have anything to do with him. Doesn't want to take any responsibility for his actions. And so I guess I tell you so many of these sad stories just to let you know that these people definitely need a lot of help. And because of people that are amazing like you. Because if you're at this conference, you're obviously amazing. You're trying. And so keep up the good work. Keep it up. And know that you're blessing a lot of lives. Any more questions before I go on to closing? No. I guess I'll just share with you one thing that I share with quite a bit of these guys. 2 stories. One time I was sitting with a group of sex offenders and we asked them a question. I says, how does society view you? They had a marker in my hand and I started writing on the board and they started saying, scum, filth, worthless, offender, criminal, monster. That's how they started viewing themselves. And I said, well, let me tell you how I see you. I see you as King David from the Old Testament. You know King David, the guy that slew Goliath and did all these amazing things, but then one day he was up on his roof and watched Bathsheba taking a bath. So David looked at a little porn and then he committed adultery, got Bathsheba pregnant, called her husband in from the battlefield to try to cover it up, but couldn't because Uriah was too faithful and wouldn't go home. And so David, what did he do? He sent Uriah with a letter in his hand out to the battlefield that said, put Uriah on the forefront of the house battle so that he might be smitten and die. And he knew Uriah wouldn't look at it. And so he sent Uriah out there and he died. I said, guys, how do you view about King David right now? They're like, he's scum. He's monster. He's filth. He did stuff worse than I did. But afterward, if you ever read Psalm 51, and read of David's prayer of forgiveness, when he shouts out those classic words, create in me a clean heart, purge me of my iniquities, wash me clean. And it seems like God does that for him. Because after that, David wants to build a temple, but he can't. But he gets everything ready for it. Everything. He gets the altar that they would sacrifice on. He gets all of the gold, all the silver, all the wood, even the things to make the door frames and the things that go in there. And so Solomon, built the temple, but David, God let him get everything ready for it. And then I share with him the classic story of Jesus found in the New Testament. You've got this woman who comes up to Jesus as he's sitting with these bunch of religious people in this house, and she starts crying and washing his feet with her tears. And the people say, they say in his mind, if Jesus knew what kind of woman that was, then he would not let her touch him, for she is a sinner. In their words, she's a monster. But Jesus let her. He let this woman, who it seems like was a prostitute, whose sins were many, touch him, wash his feet with her tears. And then he says to her, woman, though thy sins are many, they are forgiven. And I love the word forgiven. In English, our English word forgiven comes from the German word vergessen. For means completely, and give means to give up. So when you forgive somebody, you completely give it up. You give up the power and the desire to punish. And I love the word for forgiveness in Greek. Apo hemi. Apo away, hemi to send it away. How we would say it, let it go. The hardest person for these people to forgive are themselves. But they can. With patience and with trying a whole bunch of things, they can forgive themselves. And hopefully we as society can forgive them as well. And that's my presentation. Thanks for being here. Hope you guys have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you.